So, welcome everyone. I'm Alexander Mihacha, and today we have one of the industry leaders, Martin Purves, Managing Director of International Pole and Line Foundation. Welcome, Martin. How are you doing today?
Hi, Alexander. No, I'm very well, thank you.
Awesome. And I'm excited to have you on the podcast today, and I'm sure you're going to be of great value for the audience. Now, before we dive in, could you give us a quick overview of what International Pole and Line Foundation does?
Okay, so we're a small organization that works globally with tuna fisheries. Now, tuna fisheries are very important. It's a global commodity, around 45 billion US dollars in terms of the trade value of tuna, but projected to grow in the next 8 years to something like 60 billion. So, as you know, all over the world you go and you'll find canned tuna, you find sushi, sashimi restaurants, growing trade. And so we are a very small sort of organization in a very big pond when it comes to the global trade of tuna fisheries. But we specifically focus on small scale tuna fisheries, fisheries that use low impact fishing methods. That's also very important in terms of environmental sustainability, but also socially very important because it's just those coastal states where tuna occurs, creates employment in those states, and then also in coastal communities, it creates economic opportunities. So we think it's very important that these fisheries are also supported in global markets, and that's the work we do is promote these fisheries through our trade partners, which include some of the major retailers globally. And then we also work closely with governments and work on the policy side of things. Tuna don't respect borders. They cross the waters of many different countries. They move around across the ocean. And so the management of those tuna fisheries and stocks are very complex. There has to be international agreements that underpin those sort of management. And that's where we also get involved to ensure that the small scale guys have a voice in these discussions and can influence the adoption of policy. And then lastly, we also work directly with the fishermen on the water, improving issues around sustainability of those fisheries, looking at things like quality improvements, for instance. We're starting to introduce renewable energy in some of these fisheries. So lots of exciting things to basically improve these fisheries, make them more efficient, and also help them compete better on an international stage. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do at the International Pole and Line Foundation.
Okay, that's fascinating. And what inspired you to create International Pole and Line Foundation?
So I joined the organization when it was relatively young, 10 years ago. And I became the managing director, so taking control of oversight of all the projects globally. I'm not a founder of the organization. It originated in the Maldives, actually, as an organization. We work closely with a Maldivian pole and line and hand line tuna fisheries. It's a very important component of the economic activities in the Maldives, and it's also a century old fishing method in the Maldives. And originally, it was quite a small organization specifically focused on helping the Maldives promote their own fisheries and securing better access to international markets. Since I've joined, we've expanded significantly. We also have many projects going on in Indonesia. We work in East Africa. We have some projects that we've previously done in the US, working with a California fishery. Next month, I'll be going to, or in the next couple of weeks, I'll be going to Japan, where there's many pollen line and hand line fisheries that potentially looking for opportunities to collaborate with them. So we've expanded significantly into a more global organization.
Okay, interesting. But for example, what inspired the transition from your Patagonian Toothfish experience to focusing on sustainable tuna fisheries?
Yeah, so when we previously had a chat, I mentioned that I started off my career as a terrestrial ecologist, working with land-based animals, and studying when I was at university, doing radio tracking of animals in the mountains, often nocturnal animals, animals that are active during nighttime. And then after finishing my master's degree, I had an opportunity to work on a fishing vessel. It's the first time that I ever went out to sea for a long period. Initially, when they hired me as a scientist on this fishing vessel, I didn't know a lot about fish and fishing activities, and I thought it would be a relatively quick experience to add to my CV, and it ended up being my career. So I went out on this trip. We went out at sea for 45 days in the Southern Ocean, very rough sea conditions. They call it the roaring 40s and the furious 50s. That's the latitudes of the ocean, very rough seas. And we discovered stocks of a species called Patagonian toothfish, which was very valuable in the market at that stage. So that was my introduction in the fisheries world. It was a quick learning curve because there was also a lot of illegal, unregulated, and unreported or IUU fishing happening in the Patagonian toothfish fishery. Fishing vessels came from all over the world to South Africa, where I am based, to also be part of this fishery, and basically a plundering of the fishing stocks in a very short period. So the government wanted someone to help manage that fishery. I applied for that position, and I got appointed as a government scientist. And over the years, I spent many years of my life out at sea as a fisheries observer as well, which is a very tough job where you're often isolated, sitting on a fishing vessel, observing and collecting scientific data, observing what's happening on the fishing vessel as a research scientist. And then my introduction to tuna fisheries was when I went out on a pole and line fishing vessel catching tuna in the Indian Ocean as part of a large scale tagging study to better understand the movement and
Yeah.
other biological parameters of the growth and so on of tuna species. And that's how I got involved in tuna fisheries. And since then, my career has really been directed in that direction.
Okay, but for example, how are you addressing the challenges faced by small-scale fishing communities?
Yes, so uh, if you think of it, industrialization in the fishing industry is a relatively new trend when we look historically. You know, in the 1950s and 60s, a lot of industrialization happened in fisheries all over the world. Before that, a lot of fishing activities happened relatively close to land. So small-scale fishermen were the mainstay of providing protein from the sea to coastal communities and other communities. And what really happened is large vessels were built as countries, especially after the Second World War, became more affluent, started expanding, and high seas fisheries developed. And that meant that fishing vessels started moving much further away from their home base. And many fishermen these days hardly ever see their home port. They spend a lot of time out at sea, very far away from home, and it's expanded hugely. Obviously, that has led to quite destructive fishing practices and often overexploitation of fish stocks. And in the tuna world, a lot of activities that no one really knows what's happening out on the high seas. It's a bit of a wild west area where there's a lack of transparency in many of those fisheries. We hear and see reports, sometimes anecdotal, of what here happens, out on the high seas, but in many cases, there's still a lot of unknowns. Obviously, with the development of satellite technology and so on, we're starting to understand a lot better what is happening in some of those high seas fisheries. We have a better understanding of the number of vessels, sometimes the catches, but often an area where there's still a lot of uncertainty is the human rights issues. There's a lot of exploitative labor practices in tuna fisheries. Certainly, there's clear indications of modern day slavery happening on some of those distant water fishing tuna vessels, where crew are recruited and they get stuck on a tuna fishing boat for many years out at sea without the opportunity to get off those vessels. So therefore, it's for us, it's very important to ensure that small-scale fisheries have its rightful place in supplying local communities. It's important in terms of food security and as I said, local economic stimulation, and also very important in terms of providing income through export opportunities. And we feel that there's, the opportunity for many of the small-scale fisheries to actually replace some of the more destructive industrial fisheries over time, and get back to a situation where we exploit the ocean in a more sustainable way.
Okay. And also, could you share how your solar ice maker project is transforming remote fishing communities in Indonesia? Because I think this is a very interesting one.
Yes, I mentioned that to you as an example of some of the work we are doing. So, for instance, in Indonesia, we are working with remote fishing communities, and some of those fishing communities or fishermen use very basic fishing equipment, and despite that, they can still supply very high-end quality product to international markets. So, an example of that is I've been out there to a fishing community where they still use sailboats,
Yeah.
and they use kite fishing. So they fly kites, and attached to the kite is a fishing line, which is then used to jig a hook, which is at the end of that fishing line, and that is a method where you can actually catch large yellowfin tuna, and that yellowfin tuna is then kept fresh out at sea on ice, brought to land, processed, and reaches the best export markets in Japan for the suckle market. Um, and so, preserving the quality of the catch is a very important aspect to ensure that the fishermen in these remote communities can get the best earning potential from their catch. Something we don't want to see, and I'm sure no one wants to see that, is going through the effort of actually catching large yellowfin tuna and then seeing the quality deteriorate uh, if it could have been managed better. And so what this project is about is providing solar ice makers. So an ice maker in a container that works off solar power. It's completely off the grid, and this is in communities where there's often erratic or no electricity supply from the grid. And this then gives them the opportunity to produce ice using the sun, and that ice is then used to preserve their catch, ultimately ensuring that top quality tuna is brought back to land and goes into a processing setup where ideally it can reach export markets. And so it's really a upliftment project. It has obviously a huge impact in terms of carbon reduction, in terms of climate change, also very important. And then something we didn't really think about previously, but once we started implementing this project, also a big reduction in the use of plastics, because previously in some of these communities, they basically just in a home freezer put water in plastic bags and produced ice in that way, obviously also generating a lot of plastic wastage, and that is now eliminated in some of these communities. So you can, through a simple intervention, you can have a lot of environmental wins and also social upliftment, and that's really what we are focused on to achieve.
Okay, this makes sense, and this is very interesting. But walk us through how International Claw and Client Foundation addresses these challenges. What makes your approach unique?
Well, I think our approach is unique because, as I said in the beginning, we also work closely with the business community. So we don't play the role of a, call it, traditional NGO or nonprofit, because we have a membership base of more than 50 companies within tuna supply chains. Some of those are big retailers like Whole Foods in the US. We work with Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer in the UK, Edeka in Germany, Migros in Switzerland, Woolworths in South Africa, where I am based. So we've got that global supply base, and also brands and suppliers, processors that supply these retailers, and also the food service sector, the restaurants where you might find sushi. So working with the business community also gives us the opportunity to help influence and fund projects that can further improve these fisheries. So looking at the sort of approach of blended finance, where some obviously all these improvements come with a cost. Often we're working with impoverished fishing communities. They don't necessarily have the means to fund many of these projects, like the solar
Yeah.
ice maker type of project, but looking for funds from the business community, that also meets their sustainability goals. And then, because we're a non-profit organization, we can also access additional funds through grants, um, and ensure that there's, the opportunity to expand these projects in a more global way.
Okay, interesting. But for example, you mentioned an important point. So, how do you balance environmental conservation with supporting coastal communities?
Well, that's a good point, and because we work with low impact fisheries only, specifically fisheries that have very little bycatch. There's no contact with the bottom. In many of these coastal communities, because we're dealing with tropical fisheries, there are issues around climate change, warming ocean, and serious impacts in weather impacts on coastal communities. And so it's very important to ensure that the fisheries do not further cause harm to the biodiversity of the ocean. And that is why, for us, it's very important to focus on those low impact types of fisheries. And that has a very strong community focus, because the social, cohesion within those coastal communities, the people there are also the ones that are directly involved in those fisheries, and in the long term can benefit from ensuring that their fishing activities have as little as possible impact on the environment, which is connected to the resilience of the environment. When we have shocks associated with climate change, you need environmental resilience. And so, very important that coastal communities themselves take ownership and responsibility for looking after the biodiversity within their direct areas.
So, I have another question because I think this is very interesting. So, could you explain how you're working with major retailers to improve the supply chain sustainability?
Yeah, criteria in terms of environmental sustainability, social responsibility. We, because we have project staff spread around the world in different areas, we can provide them with feedback on those supply chains, identify areas where improvements can be implemented, and then work with those partners of ours in the supply chain to actually implement those improvements, whether that is quality improvements, as I said, issues around sustainability. In some cases, it is focused on data collection, for instance, uh, and um, and overall better understanding supply issues. Traceability is very important for many of those suppliers as well. And so we work on the whole suite of different projects. Okay, so we work closely with our retail partners in, because we have staff in different countries that work directly with the fisheries where their supplies come from. We can help identify some of the issues in those supply chains, whether that is related to quality, traceability, environmental sustainability, social responsibility, uh, and help them implement improvements. And so for I think the benefit of us is that we actually have boots on the ground in those supply chains or supply fisheries. And because we work in those countries the whole time, we have a good understanding of some of the policy issues, some of the management issues, and can identify how to make improvements or help identify those issues. So it's a close working relationship we have with our retail partners.
Okay. And also, I have a curiosity about that because when it comes to potential clients, what's the biggest misconception they typically have about what you do?
Okay. Yes, well, as I said, the tuna world is a very big part of lots of activity, lots of economic activity, and we are a very small organization trying to sort of create change. Sometimes it is not easy. We often have to challenge and work against the current sort of economic setup in many cases. There's a lot of vested interest in industrial fisheries, and so it can be a challenging environment to work in. We are the little guys struggling against the large businesses, organizations that are very much vested, and even countries and nations which are vested um, in industrial tuna fisheries. And so I guess there's, depending who we are talking to and who we're engaging with, sometimes they see us as disruptors of an existing sort of type of way of operating, type of business, and in some cases that can overshadow the positive impacts and work that we do. Now we do disrupt supply chains. I mean that's the only way to create change, but it is hard to do it in a way that you can still ensure that that engagement is positive, that you can basically change things to the benefit of small scale fishermen and those communities that depend on them. And I keep on reminding my staff as well as ultimately, whatever we do, the work that we do, it should be focused on the ultimate beneficiaries of our work are those small scale fishermen and the communities. Although the work might be very far removed from them when we talk to a retailer or when we engage at a regional meeting with involving many different governments. So I think sometimes there's a misconception of the organization. What is important is that we are a small organization, but we have, in some cases, have achieved quite a lot, and that is because we are really mission driven and focused on the work that we do, and we all believe in that cause, and I think that's very important.
Okay, interesting. And now, looking at the broader industry, what emerging technologies are you most excited about for supporting sustainability fisheries?
So there's lots of new things emerging. Obviously, on renewable energy side, it is very exciting, and we've got a great team that constantly thinks about innovative ideas to incorporate low cost technology, because again we have to recognize that small scale fishermen can often not afford the best and the fancier systems, but things like mobile connectivity, satellite technology that's becoming more affordable. As I said, renewable energy has got huge scope in terms of how we can modernize these small scale fisheries, and that's something that is also very important to us, is ensuring that these fisheries remain competitive. You have to incorporate modern technology, and efficiency is a big part of that. So better understanding how vessels are currently operating, incorporating artificial intelligence where possible to better understand their fishing operations, and then improving the efficiency in how they operate, and basically looking at reducing the cost of the operation, which will ensure that they become more competitive when we look at industrial fisheries and how they operate.
So, how do you see climate change impacting sustainability fishing practices?
Yes, climate change is a major impact. The warming ocean will create some shifts, and has already created some shifts in the distribution of tuna stocks, and so many of those, especially small island developing states that are dependent on tuna to a large extent, might find that tuna stocks are moving out of their waters, and they need to adapt to that, obviously. So that's the one impact, is the future will look different in terms of where tuna stocks are distributed. But we're also seeing tuna reappearing in the waters of the UK, for instance, in a small tuna fishery, bluefin tuna fishery we're working with there, that is emerging and might grow in the future. So it's basically understanding these shifts better and adapting to those. I talked about the need for resilience in coastal communities, but also, catastrophic weather events that's associated with climate change
Right.
definitely has an impact on fishermen, and it is how you are prepared to deal with those. The time you spend out at sea, for instance, if we can reduce the duration of a trip by focusing on efficiency, we minimize the risk of fishermen spending long periods out at sea, basically being inefficient in looking for fish. So, how do we incorporate that modern technology to ensure safety at sea, and efficiency in fishing operations? So
Yeah.
there's again a whole raft of things to develop and explore there.
Right. Right. Makes sense. And what would you like consumers to understand about sustainable tuna fishing?
So consumers have the power to create and affect change, and we have seen that in many commodities. There's, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's issues around environmental sustainability, but also social responsibility, exploitation of fishermen and consumers. By making the right choices, can ensure that things change on the water as well, and that's very powerful. And so, the type of fisheries we work with, one by one tuna fisheries, pole and line, hand line fisheries, are really the best choice in terms of environmental sustainability, but also in terms of social responsibility. So for consumers to start asking their supplier, their retailer, their restaurant, where the tuna on their plate or in the can comes from, is the first step. And that is the first step to create change and starting to build pressure. We're talking a lot about, changes in how food is produced, the need to incorporate issues like climate change to ensure equitability in supply chains. And so this is very important as well in tuna fisheries. Many of the top branded products consumers will be shocked if they better understand some of the human rights abuses, for instance, that are associated with some of the tuna brands that they might be very familiar with, or some of the environmental practices connected to those brands. So it's basically educating yourself better as a consumer and starting to demand change. And you can only do that if you empower yourself with more knowledge. And I think,
Right.
with with the younger generation, certainly there's a lot more focus on better food production and ensuring that the impacts of food production are not felt for generations to come after this. So, idea of nature positive production. When we look at tuna fisheries, one by one tuna fisheries is the closest you can come to nature positive production.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So, thanks for joining me today, Martin, and for this amazing podcast session. And for anyone listening, make sure to check out International Pole and Line Foundation socials below in the description because this episode was packed with values and I can't wait to see what you do. Thank you and see you in the next episode.